Greetings. Today I'm going to draw my birth chart and show you how to calculate the strength of the planets using my birth chart as an example. So here are my birth details. I was born at 2:53 p.m. Thursday afternoon on the 8th of October 1964. Time, date and the place, Sydney, Australia. So at this time, the ascendant here, 12 Aquarius 37, and I've listed the longitude of the planets, not all of them, but all the ones which we calculate the strength of. The other planets not listed here are the moon's nodes and the outer planets Uranus, Neptune and Pluto. But the moon's nodes and the outer planets, they're not strong all week. They're important, but they don't rule houses. So we don't calculate their strength. There's also here, so just to give you a look, here's the ascendant, moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, all their longitudes. And here I've listed 7 weaknesses, which we will calculate after I put these planets in a circle. The circle will make it easier to see some of these weaknesses. So let's move over here. So here is a birth chart, template for a birth chart. The houses start here at 1, and I draw a birth chart in a clockwise direction. I explained the reasons in my first video, and briefly, it's more intuitive because the 4th house represents where we come from, and to place that at the top of the chart is more intuitive. And the 10th house is our place in the world. It's more intuitive to place that at the bottom. But 1st house on the left as normal, because normally people draw the horoscope anti-clockwise. They probably have their reasons. Actually, I know the reasons. That's the way we perceive the zodiac in situ. But this is the way to represent someone's destiny. 1, 2. So I'll put my name in the middle, hey? And my 1st house is Aquarius. That's the house with the ascendant. For the time being, you should think of this as using the whole sign system of houses. In other words, the 1st house is Aquarius, and the boundary of Aquarius is the boundary of the house. Later, we will use the degree of the ascendant as an important point in the 1st house. And we will find important points in all of the houses. But for the time being, the boundaries of the houses are the boundaries of the signs. First house is Aquarius. No interceptions, no... anyway. I'll show you all the signs. Let's start with Aries and Taurus and Gemini, Cancer, 7th house, Leo, 8th house, Virgo, 9th house, Libra, 10th house, Scorpio, 11th house, Sagittarius, 12th house, Capricorn, 1st house, Aquarius, and 2nd house, Pisces. So let's put in all the planets, actually, including the moon's nodes and Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. I've already drawn this, and that's if you're going to draw a birth chart you need a practice, because you need to know how many planets you're going to have to fit in each house. Sometimes you might have to fit 5 or even more in one house. For me, there's a maximum of 3. They're fairly evenly distributed. Here is Saturn in Aquarius at 5:35. The ascendant is here at 12 degrees 37. I'll use this today. Of course, we're just going to calculate the strength of the planets and see if any houses are strong. But I'll be using this chart again and later, especially when I do aspects, transits, and progressions and directions. I'll use this to describe the things which have happened in my life. Jupiter's here in Taurus, 1 degree and 57 minutes. Gemini, the north node of the moon. So that north node of the moon looks like this. 2 degrees 13. In Cancer, there's Mars. I didn't leave much room for the number, at 20 degrees 34. In Leo, 3 planets, Venus, Uranus, and Pluto. During the 60s, from like 63 to 67, 68, Uranus and Pluto were close together the whole time. They're slow moving. They met in 66. And because they go backwards and forwards, it's like they met a few times during that year. Venus, 9 degrees 32. Uranus, 19 degrees 18. Pluto 2148. In Virgo, 2 planets, Mercury and the Sun. Mercury at 16 degrees even. And the Sun at 2140. The proximity of these is important in my life. It corresponds to an event, and it's also a weakness of Mercury, which we're going to do in a moment. In the Libra, there's Neptune and the Moon. The Moon at 2121. Neptune at 2307. The proximity of these 2 planets, which are less than 2 degrees apart, because if you add 2 degrees to the Moon, it goes to 2321, which is past that. It's less than 2 degrees. The proximity of these planets is probably even more important in my life than the proximity of these 2. So one more. This is the north node of the Moon. The south node of the Moon is directly opposite, and it has the opposite picture in that it's upside down. And it's 2 degrees 13. So I think what I'll do now, yes, I've got the phone to track me. And if I'm in the middle, if I go over here, you should be able to see the list of weaknesses. And I'll try not to move too much. So the first weakness, number 1 here, is combustion. And these numbers here in this column corresponding to the 7 planets which we're measuring. When a planet is less than this number of degrees from the Sun, it's weak due to combustion. So the planets don't like to be near the Sun. Venus, you can see here, 10 degrees. It's the most tolerant. It doesn't mind being near the Sun as long as it's more than 10 degrees. But here down here, Mars is not so tolerant. It does not like to be near the Sun, and anything less than 17 degrees, it's going to become weak. Now, this is a sliding scale. The closer a planet is to the Sun, the weaker it will be due to combustion. So it's easy to look for this on the chart. You simply look for any planets which are close to the Sun. And here's the Sun here. And Mercury is 5 degrees and 40 minutes from the Sun. Just for interest's sake, the Moon is how far from the Sun? Approximately, because the Sun's here at 21 Virgo and the Moon's at 21 in the next sign, that means that's about 30 degrees. So always need to look into the next sign. And when we go back this way, Pluto and Uranus don't really concern us at this point because we're not measuring their strength. Venus is, if that's 30 degrees and another 10 degrees more, it's about 40. It's a bit over 40 degrees from the Sun. So over here, when we look at the column of combustion, we can see that there is one planet which suffers, and I'm not going to mark anything because it would just get messy, but Mercury has this weakness. It's combust. And and none of the other planets do it. There's no other planets near the sun. There is one, and for most of these, there's a little caveat, exception, or addendum. And the addendum here is the moon, when the moon's near the sun, even within 60 degrees, it's a crescent, yes? Like in the evening or in the morning, it's a crescent. And whenever it's less than 60 degrees from the sun, it's weak due to lack of light. But it's not as severe a weakness as combustion, because these numbers, 1 through 7, are actually in order of how severe this weakness is. And combustion is the most severe. And the addendum to column 1, like asterisks, is that the moon is weak if it's within 60 degrees. But it's not so, it's called lack of light, but it's not as severe as this. It belongs perhaps here after number, like 5.5. And if you look at my chart, you can see that's actually the case, of course, because the moon is 30 degrees from the sun. And anywhere 60 degrees either side of the sun, the moon is weak due to lack of light. So let's look at the next column, column 2. It's called placement. And placement means any planet in house 6, 8, or 12 is weak. And there's an important exception unless it's in its own sign. So a planet in house 6, planet in house 8, planet in house 12, they're weak unless it's in its own sign. So over here, when we look at the chart, this is the 6th house, Mars is weak. It's not in its own sign, so Mars is weak. 8th house, Mercury and the Sun are in the 8th house. Actually, Mercury doesn't suffer because it's in its own sign. It's perfectly happy. It's actually the best place, the best sign for, even though it's the 8th house, it's the best house for Mercury in its own sign. But the Sun is not in its own sign. In the 8th house, it's weak. Quite a severe weakness. 8th house is probably the worst. And the other one, the 12th, is empty. So no planets suffer on account of being in the 12th house. So we're going to put an X for Mars. Excuse me. Mars is weak because it's in the 6th house. Mercury is in the 8th house, but it's in its own sign, so it's not weak. The Sun is in the 8th house, not in its own sign, so bad luck. In Western astrology, the Sun is considered by far the most important planet, and often that's all people talk about, whichever sign the Sun is in. And in Vedic astrology, they don't focus on the Sun so much because, well, it still only rules one house, like the others. But it does have to do with general energy and vitality, which has very broad significance. So in my 40 years studying astrology, I would say yes. The Sun is a very important planet, more important than all the others. What it also does, it tends to even out any temperament, melancholic, phlegmatic, sanguine, and the other one, choleric. The sun is neutral in this respect, and when it's strong, it smooths out temperament. So 2 planets are weak due to placement. And then we go to the third column, this is fall. And rather than look at the planets in this case, I'm going to write the sign in which each of the planets is in its fall. The moon falls in Scorpio. Mercury falls in Pisces. Venus falls in Virgo. The sun falls in Libra. Mars falls in Cancer. Jupiter falls in Capricorn. I'm not used to doing Capricorn that way. I got used to doing it. There's kind of 2 versions, and excuse me, that's not quite right. The thing about the signature of Capricorn is it's sharp, sharp, and then a curve in every direction. And Saturn falls in Aries. So whenever a planet is in the sign of its fall, it's weak. And if you look, and I'm just going to spend a moment here, any of these planets in the sign of their fall, 1. One of them is in the sign of its fall. This actually comes up again later when we do weakness number 5. It also comes up. So Mars in Cancer. Not only is it in the 6th house, it's also in the sign of its fall. Cactus, I think of it as. Mars, cactus. For me, what does that mean in my life? I will tell you another time. Next, so Mars is weak here. I'm not going to, to draw it in would make it messy, so I'm not going to draw it in here. Likewise, I'm not drawing in the fact that Mercury is combust. We'll just have to remember those. You know what I haven't done? It'd be good to have another column here, just to say whether a planet's strong or weak. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to intervene probably onto this. No, I won't. There's a reason, because I'll be using this again. So I'll keep that space. The next one, weakness number 4. I could have written, so this means less than 5 degrees longitude in its sign. And this means more than 25 degrees in its sign. And this is called infancy, when a planet's at the start of a sign. And this is called old age, when a planet's at the end of a sign. So the closer a planet is to 0, either at the end of a sign or at the beginning of a sign, the weaker it is. So it's a sliding scale, with 0 being the weakest and 5 being a little weak. So by the way, there's no caveat to this. Sign in its fall is weak. This one, there's no caveat either, except to say that the closer it is to 0, the weaker it is. if a planet's, you might wonder, for me, the first question which comes up is, if a planet's in its own sign, is it still weak if it's at the beginning or the end? And the answer is yes. But mind you, this is not as serious a weakness as combustion or placement. Professor Chowdhury, who invented this, I always in my mind, he said a thing which is a little bit ambiguous, but he said, whenever a planet is weak and badly placed and aspected by a malefic, then you have catastrophe, tragic events. And so he's kind of saying, whenever, I understand this to mean, whenever a planet is weak and badly placed. So badly placed means house 6, 8 or 12, unless it's in its own sign. And another weakness, like two weaknesses, and aspected by malefic, tragedy. There's a soft example of that in my chart, yes, which we'll come to eventually. So now let's look at the chart, and maybe you already did look. We're looking for, are there any planets less than 5 degrees or more than 25? And I'm looking at the camera, but I'm thinking to myself, okay, here Saturn is 5 degrees 35. So it's more than 5 degrees. It's not considered weak, but it's not, a planet really wants to be in the middle. Mind you, it's in its own sign. So it's okay. The moon's nodes, 2 degrees 13, but we don't judge their weakness. They don't rule a house. Here's Jupiter, 1 degree 57. It's weak due to being less than 5 degrees longitude. It's in infancy. And we'll put an X for Jupiter here. So that's the only one in this column. Less than 5, more than 25. Here, we can't actually see this on this chart. I'm just going to have to tell you. And you're going to have to calculate it yourself. You know, I did give you homework that you calculate the longitude of the planets for the time and place of your birth. If you don't know the time, then you're in the right place. Learning this astrology system is the best way to adjust or find a time of birth. When you know the day, you can work it out. The asterisk is, the longer you've lived, the easier, simply because you're going to have more events and you're going to know more about yourself the older you are. And then you will be, and I've done it for a woman when she said, I know my day, well, most of us do, not everyone, but I have no idea what time I was born, and I have no way of finding out from the hospital, or my mother's passed away, or my father has passed away. I have no siblings, etc. You know, the situation is, I was going to say no siblings, because siblings can have, older siblings might know what time you were born. So, and I met her, and because I've tuned an intuition for strong houses. I figured she has a strong 10th house. I could feel it. She had a courage, and because she was 50 or 60 years old, she had an experience which she shared with me quite quickly, which people do. They know what astrologers do. They talk about destiny. She shared her life story with me quickly, and based on her profession, I could tell that she had a strong 10th house. Well, I figured. And that's where I went. And from there, you can work out possible times of birth. There may be 2, and you just narrow it down based on other issues. So now we're up to, that was a bit of a diversion, of course, excuse me. Did this column? This column is divisional chart 9, fall. Divisional chart 9, and planets falls. Divisional chart 9 is a harmonic chart, the 9th harmonic chart. I could have gone 9 div, 9th or 9th harmonic. It's by some considered more important than the birth chart. And I'm not going to dwell on how to calculate it. Basically, they will do this on AstroSeek, the 9th harmonic chart. In Vedic astrology, it's called Navamsha, 9th division. And basically it means the ability to collaborate, to live and work with others. Some will just say wife, because they're misogynist, well, because in the history, this was done for men. Men, in Vedic astrology, it was men's business. And men had destiny and they had wives. And wives' destiny was dependent on the husbands. But that's not true. But often Navamsha is said to signify wife. Of course, we can just say spouse, and you can ignore what I just said. The ability to live and work, collaborate with others. So it's not necessarily a spouse, it could also be business partner. And of course, one day in a video, I will share my Navamsha, and it's pretty bad. Actually, it's mixed. But the consequence of that is never married, never lived with a partner more than a year. And it's in here too, it's in the birth chart because of the sunbeam week, the rule of the 7th. But the Navamsha points to it more clearly. So what happens here is you calculate a Navamsha, 9th harmonic chart, and if any planet falls in that chart, it's weak. And we don't have it here, but I can tell you, in my Navamsha, Jupiter is in Capricorn, the sign of its fall. So it's weak. The other planets are not in the sign of their fall in the 9th harmonic, only Jupiter. And I realise I'm going to be right near the end of your attention. I've mixed this, talking about these weaknesses and my chart. And I almost feel like you see, they get less important. 6 and 7. A weak dispositor means the ruler of the house in which a planet is placed is weak. So So far, Venus does not have a weakness. It's not combust. It's in the 7th house. It's not badly placed. It's not in Virgo, its fall. It's not in infancy or old age. It doesn't fall in the 9th harmonic chart. But its ruler, if you look at the chart and you look for Venus over here in the 7th house, in Leo, Venus in Leo, and the ruler of Leo is the sun, and we know the sun's weak because it's in the 8th house. So because the ruler of Venus's sign, or the ruler of Venus's house is weak, Venus is weak also. And I'm not sure if that happens to any others. So the moon has a weakness, I said, but it's only a caveat. It's a mild weakness that it's low in light. But it's, yes, and here we come to the fact that Venus's only weakness is that it has a weak dispositor. So Venus rules, is the dispositor for the moon. Because the moon's in Libra, the ruler of Libra is Venus. So the moon depends upon Venus in order to be strong. The ruler of its house is like a landlord, having a strong landlord, the ruler of the house. And without that, a planet can't thrive. But Venus's only weakness is that it has a weak dispositor and it doesn't carry over. So the moon does not have this weakness. The moon's, because Venus is okay in all of the first 5 weaknesses. It's only when we get to number 6, the dispositor, that Venus suffers. So the moon's okay. Jupiter is weak due to infancy. The ruler of its sign, it doesn't have one. It doesn't have a ruler. It must be a freehold. Well, he doesn't have a landlord. And that means he doesn't suffer on account of the ruler being weak. He can't. The others, Mars has a ruler moon, the dispositor, the ruler of Mars's house is the moon, the ruler of Venus's house is the sun, the ruler of the ruler of the sun's house is Mercury. Mercury's weak from combustion, serious weakness. So not only is the sun in the 8th house, also the ruler of the 8th house, the dispositor, is weak. So it's another weakness for the sun. And because the sun rules the 7th, it means another obstacle to relationships, which you might say lasting, happy, lasting, long, happy relationships, 7th house. So here, weak dispositor, Mercury's in its own sign, so it doesn't count. Venus has a weak dispositor. The sun has a weak dispositor. Mars, yes, it does, but only mildly, because the moon lacks light. The moon, the ruler of Mars's house, is lack of light, weak due to lack of light. Jupiter doesn't have dispositor. Saturn's in its own sign. So it doesn't count. If it's already weak, it's weak. It's like, it's in its own. It's hard for me to describe that at the moment. The seventh column is aspected by malefic planet. And since we haven't talked about that, we're going to talk about that in the next video. I'm going to describe how to judge whether a planet is benefic or malefic. I'm also going to give you a broader perspective on astrology, what we are doing when we do an astrology chart, and what we're actually, and the clue is that we're really distinguishing good and bad. And in Western astrology, they kind of don't do that. They kind of say, oh, Saturn's always bad, Mars is bad, and Venus is good always, and Jupiter's good always. It's not true. You only have to watch transits to see that's not true. And for a Scorpio ascendant, Saturn is the most benefic planet if you have Scorpio ascendant. And Venus is the most malefic planet for Scorpio ascendant. It changes depending upon the ascendant. And we're going to cover that next time. And I'm also going to give you a perspective on what part of the human being this sidereal astrology is delineating. And now we're about to finish up. I've shown you how to calculate. We haven't done this. To do number 7, we're going to have to do aspects, and we're also going to have to do benefic and malefic, which we'll do that benefic and malefic next time. So what happens here, for each planet, you see, and the moon has a weakness, it would put it in combustion. It's too close to the sun to be strong. Mercury is weak due to combustion. Venus is weak due to having a weak dispositor. The sun is weak due to being in the 8th house and having a weak dispositor. Mars is weak due to being in the 6th house and also in the sign of its fall, and its dispositor is also compromised, slightly weak. So Mars is pretty bad. Sun's bad. Yeah, these are the planets which are going to cause problems. Actually, I've never done this exactly. I've always just been juggling all this stuff. Jupiter's weak due to being in infancy and it falls in the 9th harmonic divisional chart. And Saturn is strong, but it's not as strong as it could be because it's quite near the start of its sign. So Saturn rules the 1st house, and the person with this chart, me, has a strong 1st house. It took me a long while to appreciate what this means. I was in my mid to late 40s when I began to understand that I have a strong 1st house and that that's significant. The simplest result to describe of having a strong 1st house is a long life, which, of course, someone could shoot me in the head and say, haha, you're wrong. But when I appreciated this, and I used to smoke cigarettes all the way into my mid to late 40s. I tried to stop a couple of times. The 3rd time I was 47. And you know what? The fact is, sure, having a long life is all very well, which I expect to have. And there's no signs to the contrary at this point. So as soon as I understood that I may live beyond 90, then that's all nice, unless you're not well, unless you're, what's the word? Senile. unless you start to lose, faculties, movement, and so forth, which is all, of course, going to happen anyway. But that's when I realized I have to stop smoking. If I'm going to live a long life, I'm going to stop smoking, because there's going to be too many complications. Even if I don't get lung cancer, circulation system, is just going to be compromised if I continue smoking into my old life. And even though I may still live a long life, it's not going to be as productive, happy, or mobile as if. So anyway, I'm going to finish now. In the next video, I'm going to talk about benefic and malefic, like I mentioned, and I'll see you then.